Welcome back to another presentation in our language nutrition series, celebrating NICU Read-A-Thon and baby bookworm programs around the world. So this week we have two specialists from Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware who are going to share about how they've implemented language nutrition in the NICU and beyond. So we're going to take what we've been learning in this workshop and actually take it to the next level. So I hope you've enjoyed the progression of these as we bring this back. This was a workshop we did during the 2021 conference that we did online virtually, and I'm so grateful to these presenters who have said to us that we could rebroadcast these so that you could get access to them. It's been a couple years, but it's just such valuable information. I hope you find it super inspiring. If you'd like to get some more resources, some handouts, and other exclusive material that we're not putting on our YouTube channel, go ahead and scan the QR code that's here on the screen, or go to the show notes below this video and click the link to sign up for that. We'll send you reminders about future events, as well as give you access, like I said, to some exclusive content. Do me a favor, if you are enjoying these presentations that we're doing here on YouTube, please click the subscribe button. It tells YouTube that you like content like this and really helps our channel to get promoted to other NICU professionals around the world. So thanks so much, and I'll see you at the end.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce our next set of speakers. Lexi Schubert is a certified child life specialist in the NICU at Nemours Alfred I. DuPont Hospital for Children. She is a Bachelor of Science in Human Services and has served children and families in a variety of settings, including hospitals and early learning centers. She was our first child life specialist to work in the NICU at Nemours and has been building the program over the past 2 years. And then we have Melanie Crisafulli. She is a registered nurse also at Nemours in the NICU. She began her career in the NICU as one of our new graduates in 2018 after graduating with her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Stockton University. She also completed a minor in childhood studies, where she developed a knowledge base and interest in supporting early childhood development. And she's a member of our NICU's Neurodevelopmental Care Committee and serves also as nursing chair of the NICU Sensory Support Program. So welcome, ladies, and very excited to hear from Melanie and Lexi.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are really, really excited to be here. As Sarah said, I'm Lexi. I am a child life specialist in the NICU. And this is Melanie, one of our amazing NICU nurses. We are just really excited to be presenting in this conference. It's really cool to be a part of this community and see all of the education and research that is happening around some of these really important topics. So for our presentation today, our presentation title is The Little Learners Program, Promoting Language Nutrition in the NICU and Beyond. We do not have any financial disclosures or conflicts of interest to share. In terms of our learning objectives for today, we will be talking a lot about language nutrition. We'll be defining what language nutrition is and identifying some of its developmental benefits. We will be talking about our own reading programs and initiatives that we have implemented in our own NICU, and talking about not only some of the successes of those programs, but also some of the challenges that we've faced in getting those up and running. We will also be talking a lot about early literacy development and specifically identifying some specific developmental milestones of early reading development. And then we'll also be identifying some ways that you all, as audience members, can promote language nutrition in your own NICUs.
All right, so first and foremost, how do we define language nutrition in the NICU? Language nutrition is the use of language beginning even before birth that is sufficiently rich in engagement, quality, quantity, and context, that it nourishes the child socially, neurologically, and linguistically. Just as healthy food nourishes a growing baby's body, language will nourish a growing baby's brain. The quantity and quality of nourishing language that a baby hears will continue to develop their growing brain and set them up for a healthier and happier future. This is particularly important in the first 3 years of life when their brain is growing the most rapidly. So what developmental benefits do our NICU patients get from language nutrition? So babies are born with more neurons than they will ever use. And the more stimulation that babies receive, the more neuronal connections they're going to make and the more they're going to keep. And they will keep these connections into childhood and into school. So this will set them up for success to continue to learn and grow as they progress. It's important to remember, though, the stimulation we're providing has to be intentional, meaningful, and loving for it to be beneficial. This is an obstacle that we face in the NICU a lot of non-nutritive language that is meant to be nourishing, but instead is noxious and disruptive, even with the best of intentions. This type of noise includes television, movies, the machinery that we use, monitors, and even nurses chatting. It can be really difficult to have these conversations with your staff about how the things they're intending to be so well-meaning can actually harm our patients. But they're so important to talking to parents and staff about how to make language meaningful. To continue, the single strongest predictor of a child's academic success is not level of parents' education, income, ethnicity, or social status, but rather the quality and quantity of the words spoken to baby in the first 3 years of life. As NICU clinicians, we're the first ones to make impressionable, meaningful interactions with our patients, and it's up to us to give them the best start that they can get.
So clearly, language nutrition is very important for infant development. And unfortunately, there is oftentimes a language nutrition deficit in the NICU. So as NICU professionals, we certainly know that the NICU environment is not always conducive to healthy neurodevelopment. So as Melanie mentioned, there is a lot of noxious stimulation that happens in the NICU, specifically a lot of noxious auditory stimulation, such as those loud monitors and alarms. There's a lot of painful interventions that our patients undergo, from frequent heel sticks to the more invasive procedures. NICU patients oftentimes experience toxic stress as well as maternal separation, and also just an overall deprivation of positive sensory experiences. So there is currently a good deal of research on the negative impact of noxious stimuli in the NICU, but there's less research on positive auditory stimulation in the NICU, such as language exposure. Though one recent study did suggest that language exposure only represents about 2 to 3% of the auditory environment in the NICU, which is obviously a very small percentage, especially considering how important it is for infant development. So furthermore, the NICU also creates a lot of barriers to parent-infant bonding and attachment. So caregivers oftentimes experience heightened levels of stress and trauma when they are in the NICU, which can make it difficult for them to emotionally attach to their infants. There's also oftentimes decreased opportunities for bonding in the NICU, whether that be due to the patient's clinical status or just the restrictions of the ICU in general. Additionally, NICU caregivers oftentimes experience an overall lack of control and normalcy when they're in the NICU. So a lot of times NICU parents don't know how to bond with their baby, and they don't know what they can be doing with their infant. So shared reading is a very simple and effective way to promote that healthy bonding and attachment. And this is really important because research shows that healthy attachment to caregivers affects all aspects of a child's development, from cognitive to social to emotional development. Research also shows that children who are securely attached as infants tend to develop a stronger sense of self-esteem, become more independent, perform better academically, have more successful social relationships, and also experience less depression and anxiety. So by promoting shared reading in the NICU, we can really create some long-term positive benefits for these patients. So if we have not yet convinced you of the benefits of language nutrition, we wanted to talk just briefly about something called the language gap. So in 1995, there was a landmark study done by researchers Betty Hart and Todd Risley. So in this study, these researchers went into the homes of 42 families from varying socioeconomic backgrounds. And what they did was they observed the parent-child interactions within those households. And their findings showed some very marked disparities between the number of words spoken to a child, depending on the type of environment that they grow up in. And specifically, they were able to determine that children who are read to, talked to, and sung to from birth every day in verbal, educated households will have heard approximately 30 million more words than children who grew up in less educated and less verbal households. And this ultimately became known as the 30 million word gap, or more generally, the language gap. And the language gap is a big deal because it contributes to something that is referred to as the epidemic of illiteracy. So currently throughout the United States, only 34% of children can read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. And this has been identified as an educational and a public health crisis by government and public health officials at both the national and the state level. So this is obviously a really big deal. So, taking all of this information into consideration, we saw a really great opportunity to bring language nutrition into our NICU. So in 2017, our NICU team created and implemented the Nemours Baby Bookworms program. So this is a volunteer program that is designed to partner with families to improve language nutrition for our NICU patients. So when it started in 2017, it started with one volunteer who only read in the NICU. Fast forward a few years, we now have 30 trained baby bookworm volunteers who visit in various parts of our hospital. So not only do they read to babies in the NICU, but they also read to babies in the PICU, in some of our step-down units. Oftentimes these patients are NICU graduates. And these volunteers also are trained to read to some of our older patients who have developmental delays and really just benefit from that interaction, that stimulation.
So getting started with our Baby Bookworms program, I think it's important to note that Lexi and I both started in the NICU after this program had already been implemented. So by the time we came around, this program was already in a really good place, and we've just been working ever since to make sure that we maintain this program to continue to be successful. And that led to us building upon the program, which we will get to later. So the biggest part of implementing and maintaining this program has been volunteer education. So first and foremost, we want to be sure that our volunteers understand what language nutrition is and why we're asking them to help. I think it's important to recognize that as NICU clinicians, sometimes a lot of our colleagues don't even recognize how important this role is. So it's really important that we emphasize to our volunteers that the work that they are doing is so important to improving the outcomes of our patients. We also extensively educate them on infection prevention so that they know what we expect of them coming into such a critical intensive care environment. So they're expected to follow all of the same safety measures that any staff or visitor would be asked to follow, such as a 30-second scrub, no clothing or jewelry below the elbows, following universal precautions in all patient rooms, and then any additional precautions that that patient's requiring. We also utilize e-readers in the NICU to limit the risk of infection spreading via books. And these e-readers can be wiped down with hospital-issued wipes between each patient. So our biggest successes of this program have been the creation of a sensory support team. So this team consists of bedside nurses, Lexi, and our volunteers. And our role is just making sure that the sensory support programs that we offer in the NICU continue to be of high priority for our patients and families, and providing education to staff and families about why we do this work and why it's so important. And most notably is the time that our patients have spent receiving language nutrition in the NICU. So just for some background, we are a 28 to 32 bed unit that can kind of fluctuate, but generally we sit around 24 to 26 patients as our general census. And we are a level 4 NICU, so sometimes we have some sicker babies that are not quite yet eligible for the Baby Bookworms program. So in 2018, in our unit, 2,867 hours were spent reading to our patients. And in 2019, this then increased to 3,730 hours. Unfortunately, since then, we don't have any great data because of COVID. But in 2020, in the 2 months before COVID started, we had already spent 193 hours reading to our patients. So some challenges that we have faced in our Baby Bookworms program have been, of course, adjusting for COVID-19. So there was unfortunately a large period of time where we could not have volunteers on the unit. It actually pretty recently has begun to pick back up to the way it used to be. So during that time, we did struggle with being able to provide our patients with this consistent amount of reading, because you can see our volunteers were spending a significant amount of time reading to our patients. So Lexi did an excellent job of trying to pick up some slack, as well as our bedside nurses. Even like our medical team was in there reading to patients as often as they could. We had borrowed the e-readers from the volunteer department so that they were there to easily access, and just encouraged parents and anybody who really spent time at the bedside to try to pick up this important work that our volunteers had been doing. Aside from COVID, another challenge that we often face is maintaining a sufficient workflow for our volunteers. So like I mentioned, we do oftentimes have patients that can be pretty sick and are not always eligible to participate in this program. And sometimes that makes up a large portion of the unit. So we just make sure that our volunteers are maintaining good contact with our nurses to see when patients are becoming eligible so that they can keep up with them as soon as possible.
So as Melanie mentioned, obviously not all of the babies in our NICU are appropriate for the baby bookworm program, especially considering that we are a level 4 NICU. We do have oftentimes some very critically ill patients. So when the program was created, we did create some specific patient criteria to determine which babies are appropriate for the program and which ones are going to really benefit the most from it. So currently, any infant that is 32 weeks and above and is considered medically stable is eligible for participation in the baby bookworm program. We do have some specific contraindications. So we do not include any patients that are on ECMO or considered to be pre-ECMO, simply because these patients obviously are very critically ill and could potentially become overstimulated. Any preterm infant that is below 32 weeks gestational age is not yet ready for the program. And then additionally, any baby that for whatever reason is sensitive to noise and sounds. So if our bedside team kind of observes and assesses that auditory stimulation causes adverse effects in a patient, such as apnea, desats, etc., then we will hold off on enrolling that patient. As Melanie mentioned, a big part of kind of making this program work is finding a workflow that works well, not only for the volunteers, but also for our unit and our NICU team. And so the processes and the workflow of the baby bookworms program has definitely kind of changed and evolved over the years as our unit has changed and evolved. As Melanie mentioned, we did have a little bit of downtime during the pandemic where our program was unfortunately not active. And we really took advantage of that time to kind of re-examine our workflow, re-examine the processes, and kind of make some adaptations. So currently, the way that the program kind of flows, our clinical NICU staff, whether that be myself as the child life specialist or some of our bedside nurses, will assess an infant's readiness for the program and provide education to parents when that infant is medically and developmentally appropriate. When I provide education to parents, I always make sure to talk not only about the program itself and the volunteers' role, but also really talk about overall the benefits of language nutrition and talk with the caregivers about what they can be doing to promote language nutrition at the bedside. I do always include a book or two that the parents can keep at the bedside that they can use to read to their infant while they are admitted to the NICU. And I also encourage parents to bring in books from home that they might already have for their baby. I know in the previous presentation, there were some questions in the chat about what types of books parents can be reading at the bedside. Some of my favorite stories, so like we had a family one time who dad brought in the big novel Unbreakable and read like that cover to cover to his infant. One time we had a dad who was in school for something, maybe medical school or something, and so he was doing a lot of studying. He brought his textbook in and he was reading his textbook to his baby, which was a great way to not only get some studying done, but also to be providing that language nutrition for his infant. So we definitely encourage that. So once we have, and then as Melanie mentioned, currently during COVID, we do require parental consent just to kind of be mindful and respectful of caregivers' comfort level with having an additional person come into the room, especially in light of visitation restrictions. So once we have assessed that a patient is appropriate and that we've gotten consent from caregivers, I will then add that patient to a running volunteer list that I keep in Epic, and then I'll print it each morning for the volunteers. So the volunteers will then come in, they pick up their patient list, and they do their rounds on the unit. As Melanie mentioned, volunteers are trained to check in with each bedside nurse prior to reading to a patient, just to make sure that that patient is still appropriate in that moment and to make sure that is an appropriate time. So volunteers will typically read to each eligible patient via their e-readers for approximately 20 to 30 minutes. As I said, I do always stock some physical books at the bedside of each patient that is participating in the program. So if volunteers wish, they can also read those books to the patient. And then those books just stay in the patient's room and go home with that patient at discharge. After reading, the volunteers fill out a reading log, which is what is shown here. Typically, they'll just jot a quick note saying, I read to Timmy for 20 minutes. These are the books that we read together. And this is a nice way for caregivers, when they return to the bedside, they can look through the reading log and feel involved in the program.
So what is our Little Learners program, which has become our newest project to promote reading in the NICU? So the mission of the Little Learners program is to continue to empower families and promote language nutrition after NICU discharge and through the first 2 years of life. Lexi and I were sitting here alone in this conference room cheering when CP was talking about how critical brain development is during the first 2 years of life. And those pictures that she had on her screen perfectly depicted why this was our target period to continue to encourage families to read to their babies. So our goal with Little Learners is to provide both resources and education to NICU graduates and their families with an overall goal of improving long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes for our patients. So as NICU professionals, we unfortunately know that this resources and education are not as widespread as we would hope. So we really want to put an emphasis on bridging that gap between a family's ability to access education and resources and provide that to their child. Just because a family doesn't have money to purchase children's books or the ability to get a ride to the library to learn about the importance of language nutrition doesn't mean that their baby should not be able to receive it. So we have a really big emphasis in this program on ensuring that socioeconomically disadvantaged parents and patients at a high risk for neurodevelopmental delays are high priority. So we started this program because our nurse manager came to us with a request to put something together that would allow the Baby Bookworms program to continue outside the walls of our NICU. And we would then submit that to the Nemours IPD team, which stands for the Integrated Project Delivery Team. And essentially, these are the guys that are keeping our hospital working. They are fixing our elevators, making sure our ceilings don't fall down, doing really important work that is not at all clinical. And it was just really inspiring that they wanted to help us set our babies up for success. So Lexi and I started brainstorming, making content on Word documents, texting each other back and forth, and overall just had lots of ideas everywhere. So that's when we started consulting our current partners and our marketing team. So we worked really closely with Nemours Bright Start, which is an extension of the Nemours Children's Health System that seeks to set parents up with resources to help get their children through the school years. So school-age children, they have things on their website like recommended books for ages of certain patients and children, as well as resources for parents to access if their children are struggling, or even just to help them with their daily homework assignments. We also worked with Today is a Good Day, who through their Books for Bonding initiative was able to financially support us in being able to order some books to keep at the baby's bedsides to get this program started, as well as helping fund our materials that we'll need. So through working with these teams, they were able to give us really great resources and really great feedback on our ideas. And especially with Nemours Bright Start, we were really able to build off of what our hospital and our health system is already recommending for our patients and be able to send that straight home with our families at discharge. So like I said, it's essentially an extension of our Baby Bookworms program into the home. So we provide families with a toolkit that will empower them to continue language nutrition post-discharge and through the first 2 years of life. So the way that we do that is by providing parents with a bag at discharge, and inside the bag, they'll receive a welcome letter, which explains in detail why we're giving them this bag and what we hope that they'll do with it. And inside the bag, they'll find 4 separate envelopes, one for 6 months, 12 months, 18, and 24 months. Each of the envelopes on the outside instructs parents to open it when their child meets that milestone. We will show photos of these later, but essentially it will say, open this when baby turns 6 months old. And inside is a milestone card that gives some general guidance and resources for helping your baby continue to read, learn, and grow at all of those ages. And each milestone card and envelope comes with an associated book that was very meticulously picked for that age group for something that they would be interested in to provide parents with. So essentially there's 4 books, 4 envelopes in the bag with the welcome letter. So currently with this grant, we are fortunate enough that we will be able to include all of our patients that are discharged from our unit in this program. So upon leaving, they'll get this bag, they'll get the welcome letter, and we hope that this sets them up for success for the next 2 years. Though with all things, we do anticipate that in the future, funding might become an issue in which we'll have to limit who will receive this resource by way of inclusion material. So we haven't quite gotten over this bridge yet because we're hoping to not have to get there for a while, but we do anticipate that this will be determined by things like length of stay, the infant's diagnosis on admission, and the socioeconomic status of the parents.
So this is some photos, some examples of what is within the envelopes that families get within their toolkits. So as Melanie mentioned, we break it down into various month milestones. So we have 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. And for each of those month milestones, parents have an envelope within their toolkit and are instructed when to open that specific envelope. So for this one, this is to be opened when your baby is 6 months old. Again, our marketing team is incredible and helped us just make this so visually pleasing and so engaging to look at. So in terms of our educational content, it is all kind of organized and broken down the same way. So we start out talking about some reading milestones for a baby of this age. So for a 6-month-old, at this age, your baby may smile, babble, and coo, may love hearing your voice, may like to look at pictures of baby faces, and may pat the pictures in a book to show interest. We do, for each piece of education, we do include the disclaimer that babies reach milestones at their own pace, and it is important to talk with your doctor if you're concerned about your baby's progress. In our initial welcome letter, we also include a little disclaimer about how babies that are born prematurely may be reaching milestones a little bit later as well, and communicating with your doctor if you have any concerns. We then move on to providing some concrete ways that caregivers can make reading more fun and engaging for their infant at this particular developmental stage. So some of our suggestions for a 6-month-old is for caregivers to talk back and forth with your baby and make eye contact, cuddle together while reading, point at and name things in a book. We then flip the document over and we include the best kind of types of books for a baby at 6 months old. So board and cloth books, books with baby faces, and nursery rhymes. We then include some suggested book titles that parents can purchase or check out at their local library if they wish. And then, as Melanie mentioned, for each month milestone, we also provide a book that parents can add to their baby's growing library. And then the other thing too, when we were creating this content, we did also have it translated into Spanish. So it is a great resource for our Spanish speaking families. And we made sure when we were picking out the suggested book titles that at least one of those books within those suggested books is available in Spanish as well.
We also, when we made the list of the suggested books, checked out really common vendors that people have quick access to through their phone or through going to the store. I want to be careful not to mention any specifically, but just to make sure that these books would be easily accessible for parents who wanted to get them and not something that they would have to go on a wild goose chase to find.
So moving on to our 12-month content, again, kind of same flow, same type of information, but just new content to meet the developmental needs of a 12-month-old. So in terms of the reading milestones, at this age, your baby may respond to their own name. They may grasp books and put them in their mouth, and they may drop or throw books. Again, the disclaimer of, communicating with your doctor if you're concerned about your baby's progress. We then go into our concrete ways of making reading more engaging. So we suggest to caregivers to use your baby's name instead of the characters' names in the stories. Use silly or exaggerated voices to keep your baby engaged, and add fun sound effects. So if you're reading a book about animals, make some animal noises. And I always kind of point out that I feel like to a lot of us working with babies and being around babies so much, this feels very much like second nature to us. But for a lot of caregivers, they're not aware of the benefits of this dialogic reading and the importance of that back and forth interaction with your baby. So it's helpful to really spell it out for them. We then include best types of books for a 12-month-old, board books, books with rhymes or songs, books that name things like body parts, letters, or animals, and then any sort of book that encourages interaction. So a touch and feel book, a mirror, or a lift the flap book. And then we include our suggested book titles, as well as the physical book that goes along with the envelope that parents can add to baby's library.
And then we move on to 18 months. So I think something really incredible that our marketing team helped us bring to life was our vision of this toolkit really growing with your baby. So if you think back to your baby being 24, 28, 32 weeks in our NICU, and then look now to this 18-month-old toolkit, you'll see this is not a baby anymore. It's almost a toddler standing and reading his book. And it just
like
really
getting away.
It just really helps the parents see how far their babies come from when they started as just that little peanut that you were reading to through isolate portholes to 18 months old, where you're now sitting here they're giving you a book to read, and they're pointing at pictures and they're turning the book right side up and saying, Mom, Dad, I want to read this. We're hoping that by making this fun and making it interactive, we're really emphasizing these huge milestones that these ex-NICU babies, now graduates, are making. So then again is included our disclaimer in case they're not quite there yet, to remind them that all of these babies have corrected ages and their milestones might look a little different. Ways to make reading more fun at 18 months old is to help your baby hold the book and turn pages, or to continue to name things that your baby will see, and to smile and respond when your baby speaks and points. So by this time, they're really interested in board books and books with lots of colorful pictures and books that name things like body parts and animals. I think something just important to note as we get to these older ages is that Lexi and I were finding these books were significantly more expensive than where we started at 6 months. So as their baby progresses into toddlerhood, these resources are even harder to come across. So we're hopeful that by giving them even just one book, that they will be able to succeed in providing this to their children. And then we get all the way to 24 months. Their baby is not a baby anymore. They are a child now, and they've made it all the way to the end of their toolkit that they received on NICU graduation day. So at 24 months, your baby/toddler will learn to turn pages and name things and have a longer attention span. And ways that you can make this more fun for them is to ask them questions as you go along, and to talk about the pictures that you're seeing and describe what they are, and be willing to read the same book over and over again, which we hope will be the book we're providing to them so they won't even have to get themselves anymore. The best types of books for babies at this age are rhyming books, picture books, and even search and find. So here we have some big kid books included for them, and this will kind of be the conclusion of our resources. So we start all the way and when they become eligible at 32 weeks for our baby bookworms program until they're 24 months old. And we hope that from that time, we've really inspired a love of reading in both the baby and the parent. So like we were saying, we were fortunate enough that when we both came around to our NICU, there was already a language nutrition program in place and it was pretty solidified. But what can you do if your NICU doesn't have one yet and you're really hoping to start one? So you can simply just start the conversation, go back and tell your friends about the cool things that you learned today and see if you can catch anybody else's interest. And once you have some people that are interested, you can provide some education about why it's so important to get something like this started. And once you have some buy-in and some people who are as passionate about it as you are, you can start a work group and get something started, even if it's just encouraging bedside nurses to read once a day to their patients, or talking with families about the importance of it at a lunch or a work group. Anything you can do to get people reading in your NICU will be beneficial to you and your patients. And I will stop sharing my screen now so we can answer any of your questions. Just quickly, here are our resources.
That was great. Great job. So we have some questions. Is there a certain download service that you use for the e-readers?
I believe they use the Kindle app.
I think you're right. So the e-readers themselves are iPads. And the reason we don't know this off the top of our head is because they actually belong to volunteer services. We work very closely with volunteer services, but I think it is the Kindle app.
Okay, great. And how are you tracking the time? So there were some great data from the years prior to COVID, and where is that documented, or how is that time tracked?
So that is, again, from our volunteer services. We have a great partnership with volunteer services, and we actually have kind of a point person within our volunteer services program that specifically is a point person for the baby bookworms program. So we currently have volunteers, they have badges, and they basically clock in and out. So that's kind of how we're tracking their hours.
And then for each particular baby, if the parents were the ones interested to know how long they've been reading, that goes back to the reading logs that Lexi had mentioned, how they write down what stories they read and for how long, so that the parents on a less official level can keep track of how long they're being read to.
Wonderful. And so Anne asked, with DP's research on the lower gestational age, would you consider lowering that?
Yeah. So we actually, as we all know, research is always changing. So we actually have been looking at some other sensory support programs that we'd like to incorporate in our NICU, and they actually do start reading at an earlier gestational age as well. So I think that definitely is in the future of our program. But like we were mentioning, a lot of our patients are pretty sick when they first come in too. So it's usually around that time that those patients start to become eligible. So even though we do have the 32 weeks listed and as part of our education for volunteers and families, it really is a patient-to-patient basis. So we've definitely made exceptions for patients that are a little bit more mature or a little bit more fussy who would benefit from something like this. So we really try to take it on a patient-to-patient basis and just use those guidelines as something simply to guide us to make decisions.
And I do
Sure.
think it's worth mentioning too that we do include patients that are still in the isolette, because we certainly have some infants that are above 32 weeks that still need that thermoregulation and are still in an isolette. And for that, we have specific education for the volunteers to make sure, because we know that sound travels differently within the isolette. So we make sure to provide education of kind of the best way to provide that language nutrition when the baby is still in an isolette.
Great. And Anne also asked, so the ages that you're putting on the envelope, do you explain to parents that that's adjusted age or corrected age, or what is your guidance to families?
Yeah, so I think that, so to be honest, we have not actually distributed any toolkits yet. This is brand new. So I think that's something else that we'll tackle on a patient-to-patient basis as well. I think some background that's important to know about our unit is that the data shows that majority of our admissions are late preterm or term infants. So unlike a delivery hospital in a level 3 NICU, we don't have a huge population of premature and extremely premature infants. We serve mostly late preterm and term infants. So the corrected gestational ages are not always as pertinent as they would be in other places. But when we do have those certain patients with those unique needs, we will definitely address this with the parents before we send them home.
And to reiterate, in that kind of welcome letter, we provide the disclaimer of babies who are born prematurely may reach milestones at a later age.
Yeah. And then definitely, I mean, having worked with you guys, I think that our preemie population, if they're coming to us, they don't just come to us because they're preterm. So we have a lot of pretty bad brain bleeds and things like that they come to us for. So
yeah, we will definitely. I think all of our sensory support programs are really, though we have these guidelines to support what we do, we are really patient-to-patient basis because they are really unique.
Yeah. And then just a couple of FYIs, people are putting some free programs in. So there's a Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Yeah. And then I haven't heard of this, Overdrive. So Anne was saying that there's a local e-library programs called Overdrive.
Our hope is that all of our sponsors and people who give us these great resources, our hope is that we can make handouts. So like example, today is a good day that we work with. They have tons of handouts about resources. So our hope is to just be able to keep adding these resources to the bags as we come across them.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Overdrive is an app that you can just grab it on your iPhone. As long as you have a library card, you can subscribe to your library and get free books through there. It's super awesome. I use it all the time.
Yeah.
We're writing it down.
Overdrive.
Thank you.
And Jen is asking, what about NICU patients that graduate to the PICU prior to being discharged?
That
is still a NICU graduation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that those longer term patients like that are the ones who benefit from these programs the most. And the whole point of the volunteers expanding throughout the hospital is so that they can continue to follow patients like this until they finally do go home. So like I said, we haven't actually given out any bags yet, but I can think of a few patients at the top of my mind that I could not imagine having not given this to, just because they were going to PICU instead of home.
And from a baby bookworm perspective, that's one of the benefits of keeping the volunteer list within EPIC, so that when a patient is transferred from NICU to PICU, they remain on that list. Their location within the hospital just changes. So the volunteers still follow that patient.
That's great. And then ZP's asking about recorders. I know, ZP, I was really hopeful that we were going to be able to locate that company but I think they went out of business. I'm not really sure, but they don't have those recorders available. It's like she's talking about a word counter.
Yeah, and when I had heard that ZP was presenting before us, I had told Lexi this whole saga about the word counters because that was how I heard all these lovely things about ZP was through Sarah, because we were supposed to do this project together, but we have not been successful in finding a company to be able to help us do that. So we haven't gotten there yet, but we would love to do something like that.
It's a very cool resource.
Yeah.
I can just say, can I jump in and say something?
Please.
Absolutely.
We have developed an application in our lab. We haven't tried it yet. We've just developed it, but we developed an application that allows you to count the number of words that were in a soft tone and a motherese tone. And then down the road, when the child starts communicating, it also starts counting the back and forth. So how many communication, like ping pong, the child had with the parents. So I think, it will probably be nice to use something like that. If we don't have anything better, we have the Lena, but it's so expensive to use that. That's why I was looking for the word count or something similar. So in the meantime, we developed something that may provide a hint.
That's awesome.
I will share once I have something that I can actually share.
We would love that. Thank you so much.
And Jackie was talking about the word counters used in the Sense program. And Jackie, I think that's the Lena. So that's the thing. It's not that a word counter doesn't exist. It's that a cost-effective one does not exist. They're very expensive.
Right. We've actually discussed the possibility of implementing the Sense program in our unit and have kind of determined that we probably would have to not collect that data because it's so financially taxing to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both. It was so great to see your faces. I definitely miss you guys, and to hear about the great work that you're continuing to do.
That's a wrap. This is the end of our language nutrition webinar series that we brought back this month from our 2021 Virtual One Conference. The idea about the One Conference is that one person can make a difference with one baby, one family, with just one simple action. Reading is such a simple and easy intervention that all of us can implement. So I hope you found some inspiration from this series. If you've missed any of them, you can go ahead and click the link in the show notes below, or just search here on our YouTube channel and get all caught up. We have previous seminars, things like caring during cooling, small baby care, AEEG, and every NICU is a NeuroNICU. We have tons of free content here on our channel, and I welcome you to go back and watch any of those when you have time. So thank you for being here. Again, if you want more resources, scan the QR code here on this screen or click the link in the show notes below. And definitely don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It tells YouTube that you want to see more like this and that you're enjoying our content, and it helps the algorithm share our videos with more people. So thank you again, and we'll see you